Welcome back to Eyewitness News this morning. We're joined this morning by Charley O'Hara, here to answer your legal questions. Remember, if you have a question, call us at 436-1212. We do have a caller on the line right now who has a question for you, Charley. So, caller, go ahead and ask it.
Is that me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. When renters have problems with landlords, where can they go to find out what their rights are?
Well, I mean, you're going to have a right like anybody else, basically. I mean, you've rented something. The big thing is, as I've said repeatedly here, is you sign a contract. And there's some things that landlords have to do to treat you fairly. I mean, they can't just bully you. And that's controlled by the law also. But actually, the contract that you sign with the renter, the agreement that you have with the landlord, is what really controls. So if you have a written agreement, that's what controls. And you probably ought to go to like a lawyer or something and say, well, what can I do here? Here's the contract. What can I do about this? Sometimes they're just oral agreements. And if they're oral agreements, again, then you ought to probably go to a lawyer, discuss that with a lawyer, and say what the agreement is and whether or not you can do something about that. Yeah, if people can't agree, sometimes you have to go to court.
Are there any things you can think of off the top of your head that would be something where a renter would have the right to say, hey, you're treating me improperly right here, and but despite any contract, this is wrong? Well,
obviously, I mean, if you don't have running water, for instance, if you don't have heat, if you don't have, you know, just basic things that you're supposed to have by the contract that you have with them, that would be a real problem.
Okay. I wanted to ask you a question too, Charley. Recently, Eyewitness News is talking about a case of a man who says he was involved in a chase in Harvey County, and that the policeman, he alleges, broke his collarbone while arresting him, and he was surrendering. And then he was booked into Sedgwick County jail, where he says he was not given medical treatment for 2 weeks. Now he's suing multiple law enforcement officials and people for damages. How difficult would a case be like this to handle, considering it's in two different counties, different law enforcement agencies?
Well, I would think normally under the law he could file a lawsuit in either county. Sometimes they even go to federal court and file, but in an instance like that, you could probably file in either county. Obviously, we get down to whether reasonable precautions were taken on everything.
Right.
What really happened? What was reasonable? Did he fight? He says he didn't fight, but did he really fight? If somebody just broke his collarbone and did it on purpose, it's a terrible situation. If he went to the Sedgwick County jail and they knew his collarbone was broken and they didn't take care of him, that's terrible. Now, we don't know that fact. He may have gone there, they may have looked at it, and he may not have described it correctly, and they may have looked at it and thought it was okay. We don't really know what's going on.
Right.
And until we know all the facts, it's hard to jump to any kind of conclusion to that.
We do have another caller on the line with a question. So, caller, go ahead now and ask your question to Charley.
Yes.
You can go ahead.
Yes. I have a son that unfortunately did a armed robbery with a flashlight, and he
Yes.
and he's doing 18 years for that. I've seen child molesters and murders get off 5 years, 10 years, and he's done 12 of an 18-year sentence.
Well, actually, that's a really good question. What we have is we actually have a grid that shows what you're supposed to get for most crimes. And it depends on the factors, how severe the crime is and how many times you've been in trouble. And that dictates what you get. Now, sometimes there's disparities for a lot of reasons. Some people are in different jurisdiction. They're in Kansas City rather than Wichita. It all depends a lot on the circumstances of what exactly happened.
Thanks so much, Charley. Thanks for your phone calls. We're back after this.